Hello friends, it is almost the end of January and I have been enjoying all of the 2024 recap videos, the reading journal recaps and all that fun stuff, and I figured why not make one of my own. I haven't read a whole lot compared to a lot of these booktubers that have read like over 100 books in 2024, but I did have like a pretty good reading year. I read some good books and I want to share them and talk about them. So that's what today's video is going to be. All of the books that I read in 2024 I logged on my Goodreads app, and if you want to be friends with me on Goodreads, my name is LilyPaige. Alrighty, so we're just gonna jump right into it. The first book that I read in 2024 is one that I started in like summer of 2023 and then just like kept putting it off. It is a middle grade fiction book, so it makes sense that it wasn't like really captivating me, and that book is The Firefly Summer by Morgan Matson. This book is about a girl whose mom passed away when she was young, and so she lives with her dad. I think they live in New York City or some big city like that. Her mom's side of the family, they're the Camp family. That's their last name. Or maybe it's not Camp, I think it's Van Camp. Van Camp. So the Van Camp family owns a summer camp. She gets invited one summer when she's like 12 or 13 to go spend it with her mom's relatives. And so she goes out there, she meets a lot of her cousins that she's never met before. She meets like her grandparents on her mom's side, and she kind of like discovers some things about her mom that she didn't know before. So it's a cute book. I don't know, it's like little kid adventures in that way. So it's fun, but I don't really have anything like super notable to say about it. It's definitely meant for really young kids. I did enjoy watching the main girl, I think her name is Rihanna, get to like discover things about her mom and feel connected to her through spending the summer at this summer camp. I rated it 3 stars. After finishing The Firefly Summer, I felt like really amped up and like excited that I was like getting back into reading. That was like a book that had been like, I've been trying to read it for like 6 months almost, and then I finally finished it and I wanted to like just keep the momentum. So I picked up a series that I have read before, but I didn't remember everything that happened in it. And that series is Cinder by Marissa Meyer, or the series is called The Lunar Chronicles, but I picked up the first book, Cinder by Marissa Meyer. It is a Cinderella retelling, but it takes place in like a sci-fi world set in the future. Cinder is actually a cyborg. There's like all the classic like Cinderella tropes. There's like a mean stepmother and she has 2 stepsisters. There's like a prince and there's a ball, but like that's kind of where the similarities end. There's like people that live on the moon and they have like special like mind control abilities, so there's like that element, like sort of magic, but they explain it in like a scientific way. And then there's also like a deadly disease that's like taking out a huge portion of the world's population, and people are trying to find a cure for that. And then there's also cyborgs in this world, which Cinder is one of, and she is kind of treated like a second-class citizen. They don't really have the same rights as other people who are not cyborgs. And yeah, it's really fast-paced, it's super fun, and I really enjoy it. I gave this 4 stars, but overall the whole series I would rate 5 stars. The next book that I read, I wish that I hadn't. It is Better Together by Christine Riccio. I gave this one 2 stars. I would right now probably give it 1 star. I really wouldn't recommend this book. Christine Riccio is a booktuber that I watched like since I was like 12, and I read her first book, Again But Better, like when it first came out, and it was decent, but it is just really badly written. The characters are super insufferable and annoying. There's like not really a good resolution. Like they're all just kind of like annoying and like at each other's throats for like a huge portion of the book, and then it never really gets like sorted out, and like they just stay bad people the whole time. There's just not a lot of growth that happens in the main characters. Yeah, the dialogue is super cringy. The romance is weird and awkward and cringe. I didn't like it. I didn't even talk about what this is about. It's a Parent Trap and Freaky Friday. It's like 2 sisters who don't know that they're sisters. They meet and then they like switch bodies. That's this book. Don't read it. All right, the next book was a book of the month pick. The book is Kaikai by Vaishnavi Patel. I'm so sorry. I know I probably didn't pronounce that right. This is a Hindu story. It is a retelling of the Ramayana, but it is told from the perspective of the main character's mother. So it kind of talks about her growing up and being really young, and then how she got married and started having kids, and then how she eventually met her son, who the Ramayana is about. I really enjoyed this book. It was a little bit slow moving in parts. Yeah, it kind of slowed down in the middle there for me. And it picked up a little bit more towards the end. But I think it would have meant more to me if I had known the original story that it was based off of. And it probably would have been more intriguing to like see the events from a different perspective. As somebody who didn't know anything, I enjoyed it well enough. I gave it 3 stars. The next book that I read, I didn't actually read with my eyeballs. I listened to it on Libby, and that book is Finley Donovan is Killing It. I was looking for a good audiobook to listen to, and this was like a really highly rated audiobook. Yeah, it was super good. I really enjoyed the audiobook. It is about Finley Donovan. I think she's an aspiring writer, and she's like sitting in a cafe and somebody mistakes her for a hitman. Ask her to like kill somebody's husband. She finds herself caught up in this really confusing web of crime. Her life is just kind of like turns upside down from there. I rated it 3 stars. But overall, it was a fun audiobook to listen to, and I would recommend it. The next 2 books I read were also audiobooks because I was on an audiobook kick. So the next book that I listened to was Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is my first Taylor Jenkins Reid book, and I think it might be her debut novel. I'm not totally sure. So Hannah, the book kind of like starts out with her like moving back home. She goes to a party and she meets up with her like high school ex-boyfriend or something. He invites her to go home with him. She has to like make a decision if she's gonna stay with her friend at the party or go home with the boyfriend. And then from that point in the book, the perspectives split and it shows alternate timelines. I thought it was really interesting, an interesting concept for a book. I think it had a lot of potential, but it felt like it was trying to be really deep, but it didn't have a lot of like actual ground to stand on. I don't know, profound statements that like weren't really profound because they weren't like backed up by a lot of like really solid characterization or plot or anything. It was just like, yeah, life is like just made up of choices, and it's like, yeah. I rated it 3 stars. I think the audiobook was decent. I don't know if I would recommend it. I don't think I would recommend it. It's not terrible. Like if you want to read all of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, then by all means, go ahead, but I don't think you're missing out by not reading this book. The next book I listened to was another Taylor Jenkins Reid book, and it was my first 5-star read of 2024, and that is Carrie Soto is Back. This book was super popular the past couple years, so I'm sure you've heard about it, but just in case you're not, Carrie Soto is a retired tennis athlete, and she's like broken a whole bunch of records. Like a younger tennis star starts to break one of Carrie's records, and so Carrie decides that she's gonna come out of retirement and defend her record. Her dad is her like personal trainer, coach, tennis instructor guy. I don't really know anything about tennis, but this book made it seem like the most intense sport you could possibly dream of playing, and it made me like so interested in tennis after reading this book. Like the father-daughter relationship that was in this book, I really loved that. I love a good like underdog sports story, someone trying to like defeat the odds and make a comeback and all of that stuff. So it was a really good book. I rated it 5 stars. Highly recommend. The audiobook was so great. There's like certain parts of the book where there's like radio shows or like news headlines, and so those sections were recorded by like different voice actors, and they had like the sports like channel intro before each thing, and it was just very cool. So I really enjoyed that audiobook, and I would highly recommend it. After my little audiobook kick, I picked up another physical book, and it was Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. This is the 2nd book in the Lunar Chronicles series. This follows the perspective of a character that's based on Little Red Riding Hood, and it kind of gets into more of like the space people that live on the moon, like that element of this world. We like keep a lot of the same characters from the 1st book, but like build on it. I don't think this one's quite as good as the 1st book. Scarlet's like not my most favorite character. I wrote on Goodreads that I rated this 3.5 stars. I don't know if I've fully fleshed out like what my star rating system is for me personally. but I'm working on it. I'm trying to get better. And I think this past year, like towards the end, I feel like I had a more solid vision of what I want my star rating system to be, but like I feel like my ratings are kind of all over the place. The next two books were two of my favorites from this past year. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I really loved both of these books. I know people hate on this book a lot. I enjoyed both of them and I read them back to back. So Divine Rivals is a fantasy, but it's like a historical fantasy, so it kind of takes place, the setting is very similar to like a World War I book. But there's like fantasy elements, like a lot of the technology and like weapons and the way that people dress and the jobs that they have and stuff is all like very like early 1900s style. The story is about Iris. She is a journalist for a newspaper, and there is another journalist at the same newspaper named Roman. Iris is kind of like looked down on, and Roman gets like a lot of opportunities, but she just like keeps getting overlooked because Roman gets a lot of the positions that she's kind of gunning for. So obviously they have a bit of a rivalry. Iris's brother gets sent to the front lines of the war. Feeling lonely and desperate, Iris like writes a letter to her brother on her typewriter and she slips it under the door of her wardrobe. It disappears the next day. That's all I will say about it. I feel like the synopsis spoils more than it should, but I feel like that's all you really need to know. It is super good and I loved it, and it was like super cozy and fantastical, and it's like not too long, so I finished it really quickly. And then the ending, I was reading it when I was like sick and I hadn't like left my house all day, and I finished it and I literally like got in the car and drove to Barnes and Nobles and picked up the second book to read it right away because I was like so like enthralled with the story. I rated it 4.5 stars. Highly recommend. I love Divine Rivals. The second book, Ruthless Vows, is the one that I obviously read right afterwards, and I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I didn't have a lot of the complaints that other people had about this book. I enjoyed Rebecca Ross's fantasy and like kind of the background that she gave for a lot of the different fantastical elements that were going on in this book. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. Gave it 4 stars. The next book that I read is The Do-Over by LilyPaige. I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. It's about a girl named Emily, and she has like an awful Valentine's Day. I think her boyfriend breaks up with her, like turns into like a Groundhog Day situation. So she like goes to bed and wakes up and it's like still Valentine's Day, and that happens throughout the whole book. Yeah, and then she meets like a new boy love interest at her school. I don't know why my camera stopped recording. Anyway, she meets a boy. All the days that pass, he's just like consistent in the way he treats her, and she keeps like learning more and more about him. A little bit predictable, but I enjoyed it and I gave it 4 stars. Then we were in like June or July, summertime at this point last year. Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez came out, and everybody was talking about it and I really wanted to read it. So I was like watching some review videos and people were saying that it was part of like a standalone trilogy, that it wasn't necessary, but it was highly recommended that I read the first 2 books before reading Just for the Summer, which is what somebody just always loves to hear when they want to read a book. It's like, oh, you can't read that book. You actually have to read these other books first. Didn't love that. But anyway, so I'm on a mission to read the first 2 books before reading Just for the Summer, even though it's like out there and it's tempting me 24/7. So I picked up Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This is a cute little adult romance. It is about a girl named Alexis, and she's like a doctor. Her car breaks down in like a small town and she meets our male love interest. They kind of like hit it off, and then from then on it's like them trying to figure out if they should be in a relationship or not. I found this like a bit cheesy. I don't know if all of Abby Jimenez's writing is like this, but I felt like this one was super cheesy and corny. They didn't really feel like adults in the way that they were acting. It wasn't my favorite book. I was like a little bit let down because people were like raving about Abby Jimenez. Some of her writing was a bit corny in this book, but I did give it 4 stars when I read it, so that's good. I had like a satisfying ending, so I think that like bumped up the rating for me, and I'm looking forward to reading the next couple of books. The next book was my second 5-star read of 2024, and I was continuing the Lunar Chronicles series. So this is Cress by Marissa Meyer. This one is a Rapunzel retelling, but it keeps all the same characters that have been introduced in the earlier books, and we get like multiple POVs in this book, and I love Cress. She's my favorite character of the whole series. I love her like plot and storyline and her little romance that she gets. So I gave this one 5 stars. Yeah, definitely my favorite book from the Lunar Chronicles series. And then right after finishing Crest, I picked up Winter, and this one is long. It's like 800 pages. I think it was the longest book that I read last year. But I gave this one 4 stars. I love all the characters in this series. I love the story. I definitely recommend this to anyone who enjoys like sci-fi or fantasy. Why is my camera blinking? This is my first time filming like a long sit-down video like this, and apparently my camera isn't equipped to film for more than 30 minutes at a time because it was like blinking at me and telling me it needed to rest, and now I'm like out of sunlight. Sorry if the lighting is like a bummer in this video. Okay, let's keep it rolling here. The next book that I picked up was a new release in 2024, and I think I read it like right after it came out because I bought it like the day that it came out, and it is Air by Sabaa Tahir. I gave it 5 stars. This is a spin-off series from the Ember and Ash, An Ember in the Ashes series. An Ember in the Ashes is a 4-book series. It is a fantasy series. It follows 2 characters, dual POV. Air, it takes place in the same world as An Ember in the Ashes, and it follows 3 characters. Aze, who is a like servant girl, like a slave girl, and then Saoirse, who is a she's like has magical powers. I forget what her ability is called, and she's like a bounty hunter. And then the 3rd character is Quill, who is the prince of the empire which this takes place in. How do I explain this? It's based off of like the Roman Empire. It's just like a really rich world that Sabaa Tahir has built in the Ember in the Ashes series, and then continued on in Air. But I love the 3 characters in this book. I was like completely gripped by their stories. There's things in this book that I definitely didn't expect, and I need the next book ASAP. But I also need like a little recap video that Sabaa Tahir does for her series before I read the 2nd book, because I know I'm not gonna remember everything that I need to remember. I don't know when the 2nd book is coming out, but I want it right now. Highly recommend that you read this book, but I don't think you should read it unless you read An Ember in the Ashes, and that's also a great 5-star series. There's not like a whole lot I feel like I can say about this. I know she's done like descriptions of it as if it's like a standalone series, but it's really not. Like, you need to read the 1st series because there's so much world building and stuff that like kind of gets skipped over in this book, and it's covered really well in the 1st series. So one thing that I love about this book that she made is that underneath the dust jacket there's like a cover. It's almost just as good as the main cover, and I love that. And it's like what's that called? It's like this soft like velvety material, and that's like the best material that any hardcover can be. The next book that I picked up was Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This book is super popular, and it's like all over YouTube and TikTok right now. So I'm sure you've heard about it, or at least been like told that you should read it. But just a quick summary, it is like a fantasy Hunger Games. So in this world, everyone has like some sort of magic, and anyone who doesn't have magic is like hunted and killed. So our main character, Paige, does not have any magical powers, and then our other main character, Kai, he's like one of the princes of the kingdom, and his job is to like hunt down the people who don't have powers and kill them. So yeah, that's kind of like our characters. It follows both of their perspectives, and then there's like a game that happens every couple years, and it's like exactly like Hunger Games, except there's like magic and fantasy elements. It was almost laughable how like on the nose it was similar to Hunger Games, and I feel like that wasn't really like explained to me in a lot of recommendation videos that I had seen. It's like, yeah, it's really spot on. Like there's so many things that happen that are like, oh, that's like a carbon copy of Hunger Games. But it was good and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was another newer release from Morgan Matson, and that is Prom Chanted. Another Morgan Matson book, which I love her books. She's like, has been one of my favorite authors. Since You've Been Gone, I like read it every summer. Except for last summer, I didn't reread that book. But it's from a different publisher than who she normally publishes with. This is a Disney Hyperion, and so it's very different from her other books that she's written. Enchanted is about a girl who's like always got a plan. She loves her spreadsheets, she loves her checklists, she loves like knowing what to expect. Her boyfriend breaks up with her and she decides she's still gonna go to prom. They live in like California, so they go to Disney World or Disneyland. I don't know which one is out in California, but they go to Disneyland. Okay, yeah, so wherever Disneyland is, that's where this takes place. I don't know if it's in Florida or in California. I think it's in California. Anyway, so they go to Disneyland. She like runs into this boy, our male main character. They both like get separated from the group that they are hanging out with, and then they like accidentally end up in the story of Sleeping Beauty, and they're just like trying to figure out how to get out of the Sleeping Beauty world. It's nothing crazy. I think I would have liked this book a lot if I was like 13, but as a 21-year-old reading this, I was like, yeah, I think I'm growing out of Morgan Matson, unfortunately. Oh my gosh, the next book, definitely my favorite book that I read this last year. I read in like 1 week the entire trilogy by Stephanie Garber, Once Upon a Broken Heart. This book is so good. It's so good. It has like the same feeling that like Alice in Wonderland gives you, or like any sort of like fairy tale story. It feels like you're reading like a classic while you're reading it. I guess like a spin-off series from the Caraval trilogy that Stephanie Garber has written, but I didn't know that before going into this, and I didn't feel like I missed out on anything. I still haven't read Caraval, so maybe after I finish Caraval, I will feel differently. So it is about our main character, Evangeline. She is like in love with this guy, and all of a sudden like this guy wants nothing to do with her, and so in an act of desperation, she like goes and she prays to a fate in this church, and he says that he will like grant her wish, but it will cost her the price of like 3 kisses. That's kind of how our story starts out. I knew like nothing about this book before going into it, and I want to keep it that way for you guys. I highly recommend this. This gave me like the best feeling that a book has ever given me before. Like, it was so magical, and it felt like I was like wrapped up in like a fairy tale, but the story was just like magic. Like it really was. I don't have the next 2 books because I read them from the library, but like I finished this book, immediately went and picked up the second book, finished the second book, immediately went and picked up the third book, and thankfully they're all in my library, and I read like the second and the third book in like 2 days. I'm sort of bummed out that like this is the cover that I winded up with, because everyone has those beautiful like pink covers with like the arches and the knight on it and stuff. I think it's like a UK edition of the series, but that is on my book bucket list to get those covers of the trilogy, because I want them so bad, and I love this series so much, and I definitely want to reread it. I switched the lighting a little bit because I am losing sunlight like crazy. I have this book logged in my Goodreads as the next book that I read, but I actually read it like back in the summer. Oh, I don't like this lighting. I don't know. Hopefully that's better. I don't know if this is like really counts as a book, but I read 101 questions to ask before you get engaged. It's more like a workbook. It has like 101 questions, and then it has space for you to write, so it's like each page is just like one little sentence. But yeah, I found this super helpful, and I definitely recommend it to anyone in a dating relationship trying to decide if they want to take it to the next step. This was super helpful. And then I also read another book that I have somewhere, but I don't know where it is. I read the 5 Love Languages book by Gary Chapman. I really enjoyed that book. It was like a very light, easy, quick read for me, but I found it super helpful, and I think about it really often. Definitely recommend that book. The next book that I read, I've had on my shelf for a long time. My mom got it for me for my birthday a couple years ago, and she didn't like really know a whole lot about it. She just thought that like the cover and the synopsis looked interesting, and that book is The Bookshop of Yesterdays by Amy Meyerson. This is an adult literary fiction. Miranda is our main character, and it kind of starts out with like a recap of her 12th birthday when her uncle, who she was like super close with, gets into an argument with her mom, and then she like never sees her uncle again after she witnesses that argument. And then it flashes forward to Miranda when she's like in her 30s, I believe, and she finds out that her uncle, who she hasn't seen since like her 12th birthday, has passed away. Her uncle has kind of left her like a trail of clues to help her to discover what that argument was on her 12th birthday. The mystery element is really intriguing and fun, and I didn't really see it coming. My camera keeps saying that it's overheating and then shutting down. I only have like one more book after this one to talk about, so please, camera, just hold out for a minute more. So I was talking about the bookshop of yesterday's, and I enjoyed it and I do recommend it, and I think I rated it 4 stars. Let me double check. 3 stars. I was getting picky with my ratings. The last book that I read, I also don't have a physical copy of because I read it on my new Kindle. It is Christmas with a Crank by Courtney Walsh. It was on Kindle Unlimited. It was like a cute little Hallmark movie in a book. Our main character, I think she was like an artist, and she like had like a startup business that kind of flopped. And there's like the male main character is like a video game designer, and he comes home for the holidays to stay with his family, and his family owns a Christmas tree farm. And he finds out when he goes home that this is going to be the family's last year running the Christmas tree farm, and so they decide to go out with a bang. So they recruit this artist girl and get both of their points of view. The female main character is like super fun and quirky, but not in a cringy way. I felt like she was super genuine. Yeah, it didn't feel over the top, and it felt very believable, and I liked her character a lot. For like a cute, fluffy Hallmark movie in a book, I felt like the characters were really well developed in this story, and I would recommend this as a cute little Christmas romance. I think that was 25 books, and those are all the books that I read in 2024. Let me know if you want me to make more book videos. I probably will. Hopefully you'll be seeing more book videos from me in the future. And 2025 is already off to a great start. We're gonna reach that reading goal this year. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later. Bye.